There are places in this world that look exactly like what they are. You arrive, and you understand immediately. The postcard was accurate. The photographs were honest. You look, you nod, you take your own photograph, and you leave carrying the satisfying feeling of having seen something you intended to see. Destinations that deliver precisely what they promised and ask nothing further from you in return. They are comfortable places, uncomplicated places, places that respect the limits of what a visitor can reasonably be expected to feel. And then there are places that do something entirely different, something quieter and considerably harder to put into words afterward. Places that do not show you everything at once, because everything at once is simply not how they work. Places that make you slow down against your own intentions, that reward stillness in a world that has stopped valuing it, that reveal themselves in layers, the way the tide reveals what the ocean has been holding beneath its surface all along. The longer you stay, the more you see, and the more you see, the more certain you become that you have not yet seen nearly enough, and that leaving would be a mistake you would notice for a long time afterward. Marina de Portimão is one of those places. Most people arrive expecting sunshine and fresh seafood, and the particular shade of blue the Algarve has been promising them from every travel website they have ever visited, and they find all of that without difficulty. The blue is real, the food is real, the warmth is real and immediate and generous in the way that southern Portuguese warmth always is. But if they stay long enough, if they resist the urge to keep moving and instead sit still and let the place come to them on its own terms and at its own pace, they find something they were not expecting and had not made room for in their schedule. A city that has been in a continuous, unbroken conversation with the ocean for over 3,000 years, and an ocean that is still shaping it today, quietly, without urgency, without any awareness that anyone is watching or any interest in performing for those who are. The way the ocean does everything worth doing. This coast does not rush introductions. It waits until you are ready, and then it gives you everything at once in a way that makes everything you saw before feel like preparation for this moment. Stand at this waterfront long enough and you begin to understand what this marina actually is beneath its surface appearance. Not one place but two, existing simultaneously and without any particular tension between them, separated by nothing more than a few meters of shared dock, and a considerable difference in how each side understands its relationship to this water. On one side, people who arrived from somewhere else and found reasons to stay considerably longer than they had planned. On the other, people whose grandparents worked this exact stretch of river, whose parents grew up measuring the seasons by the sardine runs and the smell of the processing plants, who cannot imagine a morning that does not begin within earshot of the Algarve. Two completely different understandings of what this place is. One water, one sky, one ancient river, moving through both of them with complete indifference to the distinction. Portimão sits at the mouth of the river Algarve, at the precise point where the river surrenders to the Atlantic. It is one of the most naturally protected harbours on the southern coast of Portugal, and that protection is not accidental. The channel is deep enough for substantial vessels at any state of the tide. The headland breaks the worst Atlantic swells before they reach the moored boats. The stone cliffs interrupt the wind and reduce the current to something a working fisherman can navigate without incident. For any civilization that understood the sea, and every civilization that reached this corner of Portugal understood the sea thoroughly. This harbour was not a discovery in any meaningful sense. It was a recognition, a place that announced its value clearly to anyone with the experience to read what a protected harbour says about itself and about the land around it. What most visitors do not pause to consider, standing here watching the yachts shift gently on the morning current, is that the ground beneath this marina has been continuously occupied for more than 3,000 years. Every step along this promenade is a step over someone else's entire life. A Phoenician merchant who ran his boat onto this bank and decided the anchorage was worth coming back to. A Roman administrator who stood at this exact river mouth and gave it a Latin name that the centuries later chose to lose. a Moorish family that farmed the fertile riverbanks upstream and called this bend in this river home for 500 years without anyone arriving to question the arrangement. All of them gone now, the river carrying no visible record of any of them except in its direction, which has not changed, and in its patience, which has genuinely never wavered for a single day in all of that time. The river does not care which side of the marina you belong to. It moves past both with the same current, the same temperature, the same indifference to the distinctions people spend so much effort maintaining between themselves. The Phoenicians were here. They arrived from the eastern Mediterranean following trade routes that exist now only in the archaeological record, but that were once as real and regularly traveled as any road in use today. The Romans arrived after them and gave this harbor a name with the full weight of Roman certainty behind it. The Moors came in the 8th century and remained for 500 years. Long enough to change the language of the surrounding hills in ways still audible today if you know what you are listening for. Long enough to reshape the agricultural patterns of the river valley so completely that the reshaping outlasted the people who did it by centuries. And when the Portuguese King Afonso III arrived by force in 1250 and took it back, he did not arrive to find an empty landscape waiting to be filled. He found something fully formed that he then had to make decisions about. He kept the essentials and built on top of them, because the river had already done the important work of deciding what this place was going to be, and no king was going to improve on that judgment by starting from nothing. The fort of Santa Catarina was not built as a monument. It was built as a direct and practical answer to a direct and practical problem. Pirates from Morocco had been raiding this coast for decades with enough regularity that the risk had become a genuine economic and human problem. Vessels from England, France, and the Netherlands arrived with ambitions that had nothing to do with honest trade. For a city built entirely on the sea and dependent on uninterrupted access to it, the sea had become its most dangerous vulnerability. The fort was the solution. And the fact that we are standing here today and that the city behind us is still a functioning city confirms that the solution worked exactly as intended. 400 years later, it still stands above the cliff, still faces the Atlantic, still watches everything that moves across that water with the same patient and completely unsentimental attention it has always brought to the task. In November of 1755, the earth moved beneath southern Portugal in a way no one who survived it ever fully recovered from. The earthquake lasted several minutes. The tsunami that followed arrived at this river mouth with enough force to reshape sections of the coastline that had been fixed for centuries. Churches collapsed, city walls came down, a large portion of the population left and never returned. That is the rational response to watching everything you have built be taken from you in a single morning. But some stayed. And those who stayed began immediately to rebuild, not because they lacked options, but because this was their place, their river, their harbor, at the particular mouth of the particular river that had always been the reason this city existed at all. And beginning somewhere else simply did not present itself as a serious option to people for whom this water was not a location, but an identity that went all the way down. Every stone in this fort was placed by a hand that understood what it meant to live in a place valuable enough that others would cross an ocean to take it. That understanding is still present in the weight of the walls if you press your hand against them. For most of the 20th century, Portimão was not a destination anyone planned a holiday around. It was a working city organized entirely around a river and an ocean, and the practical business of getting valuable things out of both. The Sardine capital of the Algarve and one of the most important fishing and canning centers in all of southern Portugal. Dozens of processing plants ran continuously along these riverbanks through the high season, starting before dawn and stopping only when the quota was satisfied. The smell of processed fish saturated everything in the city. The walls of the houses, the fabric of the clothes on people's backs. The hair of every child who grew up within a kilometer of the waterfront. It was so constant and so complete that the people who lived here stopped registering it as a smell at all. It became the texture of the air in a place that was doing exactly what it had been built to do, and doing it without apology. At its peak, the sardine industry reached into nearly every household in this city in one capacity or another. The fishermen were the visible face of it, leaving before the sun came up in boats that carried the accumulated knowledge of generations in every piece of rigging and every reading of the morning sky. But the industry extended far beyond the boats. Women worked the canning lines with a speed and precision that came not from formal training, but from years of repetition and the practical understanding that the quota needed to be met every day, and that meeting it was directly how the family ate. Boat builders, net makers, ice suppliers, transport workers. The merchants who moved the finished cans to markets across Portugal and beyond. An entire local economy organized around the ancient and profitable proposition that the nearby ocean contained something the wider world wanted, and that the people of this city were capable of providing it consistently and at scale. What the sardine industry gave this city was not only income and employment. It gave this city an identity so specific and so deeply internalized that it has outlasted the industry itself by decades and shows no sign of fading with time. The factories are mostly gone now. The dozens of trawlers have been reduced to a fraction of their former number. But the relationship between this city and this ocean has not changed in any way that the people who live here would recognize as fundamental change. The Sardine Festival that fills these streets every August is not nostalgia. It is not a heritage performance staged for tourist cameras. It is a city conducting in the most direct and honest way available to it, a live and present conversation with its own deepest story, gathering everyone together, cooking the thing the memory is made of, eating it in the open air beside the river it came from, remembering out loud with smoke and music and the smell of charcoal what it has never actually forgotten. The children who grew up in this city during those decades grew up knowing something most children are never given the opportunity to know, that their community produced something the world needed, and that they were part of that production simply by being present in it. There is a moment that occurs at this marina every single afternoon, and the majority of visitors miss it completely, not because they are inattentive or careless people, but because the moment arrives without announcement and rewards only those who happen to be standing still when it does. They are at a restaurant reviewing the menu with the focused attention that restaurant menus in good restaurants tend to demand. They are looking at their phones because their phones have decided that this specific moment requires their attention. They are already in a car heading back to wherever they are staying, watching the marina recede in the side mirror. And while all of that entirely reasonable activity is happening, the light finds the marina without them and proceeds to do exactly what it does with the complete indifference of something that has been doing this every single day, for longer than anyone has been here to observe it. The white hulls of the yachts take the late afternoon light and hold it in a way that turns them from white to a warm gold that makes them appear lit from inside rather than from above. The surface of the arrayed catches the same light and breaks it into hundreds of separate moving fragments, each traveling at its own pace and in a direction slightly different from all the others, so that the entire river looks briefly alive in a way that goes beyond the simple biological fact of water following gravity. The stone of the fort of Santa Catarina, which presents a face of grey severity in the morning, accepts the late afternoon light and releases something amber and warm from apparently inside the rock itself, as though 4 centuries of stored Atlantic sunlight are finally being returned to the air that stored them. For approximately 40 minutes every afternoon, this marina becomes something no camera has fully captured. You have to be present for it. You have to let it happen to you rather than trying to record or manage it. That is the only way it actually works. This is what the Algarve does to people who give it enough time and enough genuine stillness. It does not perform for you or arrange itself around your schedule or your expectations about what a beautiful coastal place is supposed to look and feel like. It simply continues being exactly what it is and waits with complete patience for you to stop moving long enough to notice. And when you finally stop, when you put everything down and stand somewhere and breathe the salt air coming in off the Atlantic, it finds you in a way that is genuinely difficult to describe to someone who has not been here. A feeling that resists precise language but is absolutely impossible to mistake for anything other than what it is. The sense that this river mouth, this specific arrangement of water and stone and ancient human presence and Atlantic light, is somewhere you recognize from a distance you cannot measure and a direction you cannot name. Painters have been attempting to capture this quality of Algarve light for centuries and have produced genuinely beautiful work in the attempt without any of them ever fully arriving at the thing itself. Cameras come closer than any other medium and are still not close enough. What cannot be reproduced is the quality of simultaneity that the light here produces in the person standing inside it. The sense that the past and the present exist at exactly the same depth in this place, layered over each other so carefully that nothing we have built is sensitive enough to locate the boundary between them. Standing at this marina in the late afternoon, watching the light make its daily and entirely unrepeatable argument for why this stretch of coast has been worth everything spent on it across 3,000 years, you understand something that is genuinely difficult to explain to someone who was not standing here beside you. The Algarve light is not passive. It does not simply illuminate what is already there. It makes decisions about what matters. And in the late afternoon at this marina, what it decides matters is everything you can see from where you are standing. Portimão has watched civilizations approach this river and recede from it across 3,000 years. The Phoenicians conducted their trade on these banks and sailed back toward the Mediterranean, and the world moved on without them in the way the world always moves on without the people who were here before. The Romans named this harbor and administered it and built beside it, and eventually the empire that sent them here dissolved in the way that even the most certain empires eventually dissolve, and they became history in the way that everyone becomes history given enough time. The Moors built a fully realized civilization on these riverbanks across 500 years and were removed from it in a generation that had no understanding of what it was dismantling. The sardine factories ran without interruption through most of the 20th century until the economics changed and the fish grew fewer and the canning lines went quiet one after another until they were all quiet. The tourists come with the warm months and fill these streets and this marina and then leave when the season turns. Everything passes through this place. The place itself does not pass. It adjusts. It absorbs. It waits. It continues. What holds a place together across 3,000 years of continuous occupation cannot be reduced to any single explanation without losing something essential in the process of reducing it. It is not architecture alone, though the fort still stands. It is not economy alone, though the fishing boats still leave before sunrise. It is not collective memory alone, though the August festival keeps the memory alive in the most direct and honest way a living community knows, which is by gathering in the open air beside the river and cooking the thing the memory is made of and eating it together the way the people who made that memory used to eat it. What holds a place together across that kind of time is something quieter and more stubborn than any of those things individually. It is the shared understanding that moves from one generation to the next without ceremony or formal instruction, that this particular ground is worth standing on and this particular river is worth coming back to after the earthquake, and this particular ocean is worth facing every morning, even after it has shown you what it is capable of doing to everything you build near it. Portimão has made that choice across 30 centuries. It has never chosen differently. Some places exist to be visited and left behind without much residue in the person who visited them. Some places exist to be studied and understood from a comfortable academic distance. Portimão exists for neither purpose and has never needed either justification. It exists because 3,000 years ago the ocean and the river between them arrived at a judgment about this particular meeting point and announced it in the only language available to water, which is the language of what it does to the ground it crosses and to the people who stand beside it, long enough to understand what it is saying. And every single person who has ever lived here, who has fished this river before the sun came up, who has built on these banks and buried their dead in this ground, and raised children who grew up knowing the sound of the arrayed, the way other children know the sound of traffic outside their window, has simply agreed with that judgment, not with fanfare or ceremony, just with the quiet, daily, unremarkable act of staying, of coming back after everything that tried to take them away, of choosing this water over every other water the world has ever offered them, right here at the edge of the land, where the river meets the sea, where the sea meets the sky, and the sky, as it always has, goes on forever.